Roman? What the fuck? Dwelling too much on any aspect of life tends to give you tunnel vision, especially if it's the kind of thing with multiple different interpretations and angles. So you can obsess over it all you like, but sometimes just letting the thought fester for a little while can prove quite useful. The creepiest part of any video game is what it doesn't show you. That's most of the reason why I never really liked jump scares. Slow, calculated horror always affected me more than someone screaming in my face. Quite often the creepiness can take so long to seep into your consciousness that you only really appreciate it sometime after. The name TV tropes gives this is fridge horror, where something becomes terrifying a little way down the road. That moment of realization, hard to achieve, but goddamn invaluable. Sadly, a name like fridge horror brings up images of some horrendous accident involving off milk, so I think we should call it something else for now. That's kind of what fridge horror is really, a small bit of insight that makes the lore in the background of the game far more unsettling. You can go through the whole game without thinking about it, but as soon as you do, there's no turning back. I think it's safe to assume that most people know that Aperture Science isn't your standard collection of scientists. Though you'd have to say that any group of smart people who want to make a portal gun give them as much money as they need. But to get to this stage and to further test the portal gun, they've gone through the kind of tests that no sane individual would ever sanction. And while it's common knowledge that Aperture Science is full of crazies, it's how deep it goes that reveals just what this insane company are really capable of. So Cave Johnson is a character in this game, and despite becoming relevant about halfway through the game, he manages to go some way towards stealing the show. Importantly, he's as mad as many boxes full of many frogs, and hearing him talk of mantis men, making funky physics gel, and eventually putting his assistant into an AI shows just how far down the rabbit hole he's gone. And wouldn't you? A company that previously made shower curtains expanded their business after getting governmental backing, leading to ridiculous unchecked scientific growth and making Cave Johnson into some kind of deity. My point is that GLaDOS releasing the neurotoxins and killing the company off was actually the right move. Sure, it killed a lot of innocent people, but Aperture Science is an organization that runs off, throw enough stuff at a wall and see what sticks, where they make science from scratch and don't learn from their mistakes. That is pretty fucking dangerous. Hey, it's not all bad, we got Ratman out of that, and he's kind of interesting. Science doesn't suffer for nothing. I feel like there's very little that can be said about Undertale that the internet hasn't already shouted from the rooftops, to the point where everyone else is waiting for something new to get invested in. Hey, Undertale's been out for over a year now, that makes it no longer relevant. That means I can talk about it, right? Nice, good talk guys. Undertale's genocide ending is as bleak as you'd expect, and the pacifist, perfect goody two-shoes ending ties up as many loose ends as possible, but the different scenarios set up by the neutral ending aren't so great. A typical first run through Undertale, without any knowledge of what kind of game this is clumsy. You make a lot of mistakes, you end up killing bosses and enemies that you never wanted to kill. Really, it's only there to convince you that you should replay the game now you have more knowledge of what's going on. But the state you leave the game in after that first run isn't brilliant. Hey, sometimes sparing opponents gets tiring, and getting in a position where you can actually spare them isn't so easy. Besides, you have to settle for the neutral ending the first time around anyway, so you might as well learn to like it. Except that isn't so easy. While there are different neutral endings depending on who you kill, at the very least you're disposing of Asgore, so the Underground loses their leader and the spearhead of their goal of breaking the barrier to the human world. Defeating Flowey is a grueling challenge which I'm reminded on a daily basis is one that many people did in one try, but did you notice how the colourful human souls that Flowey absorbed didn't end up back in stasis? These souls plus yours were the only chance the monsters had of reaching the surface, and they now have to rebuild with however many of them are still alive. At least in the genocide route there's no one left to try and hold society together. really it's just all your fault and you should feel terrible about it. It's a year later. That's a long time to feel remorseful. Usually fridge horror and the like are slow burners in games that are typically reasonably mannered. Effectively, the horror isn't as prominent, which disarms you to your surroundings and makes the realization all the more devastating. Then we have a game like Mother 3, which continually kicks you in the face and tries to distract you with colourful visuals, but it doesn't really work. I mean, it does, it's a great game, but there's not a lot of stuff that you have to think hard about. Maybe the ending, that's pretty wacky. Also, when Klaus dies or gets knocked unconscious and Porky finds him, what exactly happened next? The Masked Man, being this ruthless, all-powerful monster capable of using powerful psychic attacks, run completely perpendicular to the character traits of Klaus. In this state, the Masked Man is completely under Porky's control, and so it's questionable how much of the original Klaus is left. When you do snap Klaus out of the brainwashing, he almost immediately uses Lucas's Franklin badge to kill himself. I guess the question I'm trying to ask is, how did Porky brainwash Klaus, and also, how bad was that process that as soon as Klaus gained consciousness, his first thought was to kill himself? Child suicide is already hella creepy, but when combined with a brainwashing, it's all a bit much, really. Given the choice, just don't think about anything in this game. Won't go well. Considering how long Mega Man has been going on for, it's perfectly understandable that they would start to run out of decent ideas for Robot Masters. Sadly, the series got to a point where Capcom decided that people were tired of the whole franchise as opposed to just a few unoriginal boss ideas. And actually, looking back at the entire roster, there's a few weird ones, but the vast majority are pretty solid design-wise. Some sound and are scarier than others though, and you'll have a hard time convincing anyone that Dustman from Mega Man 4 is anything to be afraid of. You know what's not scary if you're taller than roughly 6 or 7 inches? Vacuum cleaners, they're not the most threatening of household appliances. But you've got to remember what Dustman's stage looks like. Before Dr. Wily got involved, Dustman was a simple robot tasked with sanitation, which thanks to having vacuum cleaner for a head, comes pretty naturally. Dustman's stage in Mega Man 4 is a junkyard, more importantly, a robot junkyard. What are broken robots to a corrupted robot master than more crap to consume? Effectively elevating Dustman to the status of a robot cannibal. I mean, you can beat him in under 10 seconds with that ring weapon, but if you stop and take in the level you're going through, it's surprisingly macabre. This was back when Capcom cared about Mega Man and when the best we could have hoped for didn't feel like a foreign bootleg. Those glorious golden days. The Pikmin trilogy aimed to bring hostile environments to an outstandingly adorable setting, effectively making it a calm, generously paced introduction into survival games. Yet they still managed to feel bleak, with your salvation in some of these scenarios being impossible if you aren't willing to work for it. It's the best of both worlds really, everything wants to kill you, including the planet, but god damn, it's also adorable. With every new game, the threat became a little less scary, but Pikmin 2 brought the horror a bit too close to home when they introduced real-world items? Alright, now this is cool. I remember reading an article in a gaming magazine that went over every treasure in Pikmin 2 and how they relate to their real-world counterparts. It helps give value to everything you collect because you know how valuable or otherwise each item is. But why? It's a nice touch, but why would these objects relate so closely to real life? Well, that's because PNF 404, the planet that Olimar lands on in the first 2 Pikmin games, is a very Earth-like planet. Maybe not our Earth, maybe an alternate universe, but an Earth-like planet that has since seen the extinction of humans, as explained by Shigeru Miyamoto himself. What's creepier is that the extinction level event must have happened around the turn of the 21st century, since it's all current period items. So the world ended quite recently, and then some tiny creatures walked all over our humanless planet and found value in all of our shit. Don't feel like cleaning up after yourself? End the world! That'll sort it. Wartime brings out the worst in everyone. It divides families and separates society based on agendas. But enough political commentary, let's talk about video games! With a lack of a single player campaign, Overwatch isn't a game that rams its story and lore down your throat. There's plenty of it, and a combination of wiki diving, reading comics, watching animations, and listening to certain dialogue on certain maps will tell you that the world has taken a bit of a beating from robots called Omnics, with countries like Russia and Australia bearing the brunt of the attack. But Overwatch did their thing, and now the world lives in harmony with the Omnics. Look, they're even spiritual leaders now. No way, he got shot. While parts of the world have decided to live in harmony with the Omnics, the skeptics that live in England aren't so convinced. The map King's Road is adorned with graffiti letting the Omnics know exactly what the locals think of them. Places like Numbani may have humans and Omnics living side by side, but not everywhere. It's always worth paying attention to what exactly your goal is in these game modes. King of the Hill maps are easy enough because apparently taking control of a couple buildings in Nepal is important, but the payloads are really interesting. In particular, King's Row, where the large device you're escorting on the attack side of the map isn't a VIP like in Hollywood or a battering ram like in Eichenwald, but actually an EMP or electromagnetic pulse, i.e. something capable of frying all electronic circuits in the area. Gee, I wonder if there's anything electronic kicking around this neighborhood that really hates Omnics. That's right, your objective on one half of King's Row is to transport an EMP to some nearby Omnics and destroy them. And yes, you can play as characters like Junkrat and Zarya, who would be well up for that, but you can also play as Zenyatta and Bastion, two Omnics whose involvement would be the ultimate betrayal. And all this time you can drop that bomb without knowing what you're actually doing, proving once again that ignorance is bliss. Most creepy dungeons that are visited in the world of Legend of Zelda have backgrounds to them that help to elevate them beyond others. Kinda necessary really, otherwise the reason why you might feel a certain amount of unease is, hey, look how scary it is, ain't it scary? Proper horror doesn't really need an explanation, but I'm down for a good backstory now and then. Supposedly the Shadow Temple in Ocarina of Time was built up as the epicenter of all the bad things in Hyrule, and probably some kind of prison. And of course, since Twilight Princess loves Ocarina of Time, we got something similar with the Arbiters Grounds, a prison designed to hold all the really bad people in Hyrule. But who were the bad people? Well, the race of people that ended up being banished. The Arbiters Grounds is a grisly place to walk around. Between the torture devices, quicksand as far as the eye can see, and every other surface being covered in spikes, this isn't an ordinary prison. And considering that this is where the Twilight were detained and kept while they were being banished for using dark magic, I think it's safe to assume that a lot of these skulls may have a relevant origin story. Even if it isn't the Twilight, which makes a ton of sense, there aren't a lot of Gerudo hanging around anymore. Who's to say that the powers that be committed some kind of mass genocide on a whole race of people just because of what Ganondorf did earlier in the timeline? Whoever ended up here, they weren't having a good time. It's practically a concentration camp. Death's Sword has been tied to the temple for years, and Stalord is old as fuck. He was probably some kind of ultimate punishment for inmates. Twilight Princess is a creepy game when it wants to be. Mario games tend to be a lot creepier if you spend enough time thinking about them. These Goombas? Yeah, they were almost definitely innocent and you're murdering helpless creatures. Things don't get any better when the focus is shifted to Luigi and his adventures around a haunted mansion. Really, you can think too much on any of these ghosts and their ultimate fate of ending up pressed inside a painting and squeeze a bit more horror out of it. But there's a small ghostly elephant in the room. Remember Chauncey, the first boss fight in the game against this annoying baby? Yeah, have you ever noticed how he's like a fucking baby? Alright, so beating up a baby isn't recommended at the best of times, but the one thing you can't ignore is how Chauncey is a ghost baby, or, to skip a few steps, a dead baby. Although supposedly he was born a ghost, so that makes everything fine, doesn't it? No, it doesn't. Not even close. How is a baby born a ghost? Well, I'm sure we can work that out. We're going into some seriously shaky territory here, but in my mind, a baby is born a ghost either through a miscarriage or a stillbirth. Or maybe if you want a slightly more cheerful option, maybe his mother Lydia died while pregnant with him. Somehow that's the cheery option. You can't make ghosts adorable forever. There is maybe one other way that Chauncey can be born a ghost, maybe not dying without being born, and more so, maybe his parents found something interesting to do in the afterlife, though that raises further questions, such as, can ghosts have sex? And also, his parents don't seem to have the necessary equipment to do so, though I know which one I would rather be correct. Usually for videos like these I like to include entries from different franchises, but for a very good reason, I'm kind of sort of breaking that rule. I mean, only slightly. Both Luigi's Mansion and Super Paper Mario are spin-off Mario games, and both take a more direct approach with how they handle creepiness in a video game. I know this video is all about subtle horrors, but god damn it, Mimi spinning her head around the river twigs, it's all way creepier than you would have thought necessary for a Mario game. But there's one moment about 2/3 of the way through the game where the Sama Kingdom, a world full of samurai guys, is used to show what kind of threat the Void is in this game. It demolishes the world and you're thrown back to the main hub world. Walking back through the door is pretty shocking. So okay, big scary dimensional rift in the sky can destroy worlds, important information to have. But what took me a while to grasp is just what happens to the people who suffer from it. The next chapter in the game sees you venture to the Underwear. A thinly veiled joke, it's okay if you don't get it. But this place effectively acts as the world's hell. Mario and co end up dying to dementia and enter this place as some kind of afterlife, because that's what dead people do for fun. But here's the thing, the moment of realization that clanged through my head like half a dozen church bells, where's the Sama guys? They're not here because, technically, they never died. When the Void swallowed most of the Sama Kingdom, it also obliterated everyone who lived there, and so the Sama guys themselves didn't die, they got kind of erased from existence. If you need a showcase of the power of the Void, it bends the very fabric of nature. You sure you don't want to switch sides? It's been well documented that a pre-Zack Snyder and a post-comics doing weird things Batman doesn't like to kill anybody. I think because of a combination of not wanting to stoop to the level of the bad guys and succumbing to the chaos and anarchy he's trying damn hard to stop, and also because he can get an awful lot done by simply kicking the shit out of them. Though it's worth noting that in itself isn't necessarily a green light for righteous justice. Batman might not be directly killing anyone, but who's to say that all this head trauma and leaving henchmen out in the cold isn't affecting them in quite a bad way. Being knocked out generally doesn't do you much good. Neither does being thrown around while pregnant, but hey, there's no women thugs in any of these games, so that's fine. But that's not true. Harley Quinn spends every game in the Arkham series strutting around, hanging off the Joker, and generally teasing Batman whenever an opportunity presents itself. However, with the Joker having a bit of a crap time in Arkham City with being ill and stuff, it falls on Harley Quinn and a few others to give Batman a hard time, an act that Batman responds to by body slamming them to the ground. Fair enough, I guess. Then you go to the Joker's hideout and find a positive pregnancy test and... oh no, let's not become that type of game. What happens next is creepy as fuck regardless of the truth. The negative pregnancy test littering the floor in the DLC Harley Quinn's Revenge, set briefly after the Joker's death, are either the actual result with the previous test showing a false positive like it says on the box, or it's possible that Harley Quinn getting thrown around by Batman caused her to have a miscarriage. Why are there so many tests? Wouldn't you want to check a few dozen times if it suddenly came back negative? Either way, the fact that she doesn't get her baby and the Joker dies fucking destroys her, demonstrated quite aptly by a post-credit scene where she sings to a non-existent child.
Hush, little baby, don't say a word. Mama's gonna kill for you the whole damn world.
This is RabbidLuigi, and in the comics, Harley Quinn does give birth to a child called Lucy, who she offloads to her sister for reasons. Though it's worth noting that not everything that happens in the comics carries over to other media. The Joker just dies for fun in the comics. But hey, I've managed to make a video about creepy, slightly jovial things in video games, while also mentioning dead babies. Twice. Happy Halloween? Hey guys, hope you enjoyed watching that. I certainly enjoyed making it because I got to run around at night wearing a GoPro, which I've never done before. Also, there was a clown, but you know, that's no great revelation. Since this went up on a Monday, I actually had an extra day to make it, which is probably how I was able to do that thing at the start. And of course, if you didn't see the trailer, Pokemon starts tomorrow, and now this video is out of the way, total focus on that from here on out. It's gonna be good, got a ton of content ready, and if you don't like Pokemon, you soon will. I'll fucking drown you in Pokemon and there's nothing you can do about it.